So, this is an absolutely insane story. The First Nations Leadership Council is effectively calling for the jailing of sitting BC MLA Dallas Brodie for residential school denialism. What do we mean when we say residential school denialism? Well, Dallas Brodie accurately says there is not a mass grave of 215 dead children under the Kamloops residential school. That's literally it. An accurate statement is getting this radical far left reconciliation industry lobby group to want her locked up in prison. And when I say locked up in prison, I am being accurate because what they want in this press release that they put out is that they want the legislation that MP Leah Gazin from the NDP was pushing forward to be retabled. Because naturally, if you prorogue government the way Justin Trudeau did, it means all current legislation moving through the House of Commons and the Senate basically just goes kaput and it has to be put forward yet again. The FNLC wants this put forward again. That legislation had a penalty of prison time for residential school denialism. Does Dallas Brodie deny residential schools? Obviously not. She just denies something that didn't happen, which is a mass grave of 215 dead kids that doesn't exist. How do we know it doesn't exist? Because the Kamloops band was given $8 million to investigate, and so far they have not investigated, but presumably they've spent all the money. That does feel like this is more of a doth protest too much kind of a move by the FNLC, which is the First Nations Leadership Council, I think I already said. It's effectively a publicly funded organization. Not only will they be getting provincial and federal money, but most of the money comes from different band councils funding it because it is their primary, frankly, lobby group and thug organization going around trying to effectively intimidate people into not opposing them. This was a big mistake. You don't go after a sitting MLA like this and not expect some pushback. But later on in this, later on in this letter, they then try and make this their actual primary complaint against Dallas Brodie and basically saying why she needs to be like jailed. Look at this. The language and actions of publicly elected officials significantly shape societal attitudes, influence public perception, and have the power to either foster understanding and healing or perpetuate division. In her statements, MLA Brodie shows blatant disrespect for her position in public office by promoting harmful residential school denialism on her social media. We are glad Mr. Rusted has removed MLA Brodie from the Conservative Party and believe she is unfit to sit as an MLA in the legislature. My goodness, because she said something accurate. By the way, even John Rusted, who's a complete coward when he got rid of her, admitted that she was right on the burial issue, but then he made up some other nonsense that she mocked residential school survivors, which she absolutely did not. In the video that he clipped 3.5 seconds from, she was mocking activists, basically saying the truth doesn't matter when she points out there is no graves because I have other stories, so it doesn't matter what the factual basis of that claim is. I can basically make stuff up or I can cite some actual victim. And now, if you oppose me on the lie, now you're attacking this victim, which is in fact a very disgusting thing to do, to take somebody's actual real trauma and then to connect it to a fake case and then say, well, if you oppose this fake case, you must hate this person who was abused. This is like what Al Sharpton and race hustlers in the United States do. If you don't believe race hoaxes that they push, well, you must have been in favor of slavery. You must have been in favor of Jim Crow because they are people of low moral integrity. I want to jump over to somebody who's also been attacking Dallas Brodie over all this because this is one of the biggest tells you'll ever see that they know they're in the wrong. This man, Wade Grant, who I believe is running for the Liberals somewhere in Vancouver, is going to basically on Mo Amir's show Van Color say that actually it doesn't matter that the Kamloops band doesn't want to investigate to find out there's bodies or not. You're still wrong for even having a thought that there isn't bodies there. Check this out.
We have to know that residential schools, we know that children died there. We know children were abused there.
He seems a little happy about that, by the way. That I'm going to say this very carefully. That doesn't matter to the facts of this new case. Did kids die? Yes, mostly of disease, which is still bad. And were kids abused? Obviously, that's disgusting and evil. But now to be on a show, to now push back on an MLA and call her a racist and a denier and all that stuff, because she then says there is not a mass grave, and then you're going to say, well, kids were abused. You're a piece of garbage for doing that.
We have direct testimony from residential school survivors that talked about the horrific things that happened to them. It's not up to us to go and dig up the Kamloops Indian Residential School. That's the Kamloops Indian band that has that right. It's their title and rights. They're their title.
That's not actually how that works, by the way. If you owned a farm and you said there is a mass grave of 25 people that was probably from 60 years ago, maybe it was even from 100 years ago, if you just let them know about a mass grave, the police know about it, it doesn't matter if you're a land, they'd get a warrant in a second to go dig that up, because that's insane. What's happened is that the political establishment and our institutions, the police, prosecutors, and other elected officials, are too scared to actually say, can we actually see if this is correct? And so the Kamloops residential band, or the Kamloops, not residential band, the Kamloops band has basically monopolized ownership over this dig, so that they are not actually going to dig, because if they dig, they will find out they're wrong. Other bands who also found through ground penetrating radar anomalies in the ground, and they were convinced it could be a mass grave, some of them actually tried to dig it up, and they were very open and said, yep, there wasn't anything, and Kamloops doesn't want to find that outcome for itself. But the idea that now, no, you can't tell them to dig it up, that's rude. Is it rude? Or is it that we want to know the facts so that people cannot keep going perpetuating a lie as saying that you're a bad person if you even suspect that it might not be real?
Rights holders there, and they want to take the time because they know how difficult it's going to be to uncover anything, because there's still so many survivors that are trying to heal from there. I don't think we need to go and dig up bones to prove that children died in residential schools. And
except that's not what people are saying. Nobody's saying kids didn't die in residential schools. Could kids have been even murdered in residential schools? Sure. Were 215 kids murdered in a Kamloops residential school? No. That's the problem here. He's using the general fact in order to prove the specific, like, mass murder, which is insane. That's not how evidence works.
That's what's so hurtful, is that we're having to discuss this again, and to be able to come to an agreement that residential schools were so horrific in a dark part of our past. It's very ignorant of people to think that residential schools weren't as bad as they were. They were absolutely something that we should never forget, but never go back to.
Yeah, everyone agrees. Yeah. Obviously, education itself is not bad, but the way they were set up and run was horrible. But again, this guy is such a weasel, going around basically coming and saying, well, residential schools were bad. I'm not sure why we're having to talk about this. Nobody's talking about this. Only you're talking about this. Dallas Brodie said there aren't not 215 dead kids. Even Rustad has had to say it, the coward, who still kicked her out and now won't actually apologize to her, despite literally basically smearing her as a racist who doesn't care about, like, molestation victims. Evil thing to say about Dallas. Even he had to say that there wasn't 215 kids, because his own base knows that that's completely untrue. Even the NDP base knows it's untrue. And now this guy's here to basically pretend like the conversation was about something else, because he's a grifter. He's a race hustler.
The actual, slogan of it in the late 1800s was to kill the Indian and the child, to take them away from their culture, to take them away from their families, so that they could be assimilated into greater Canadian society. So many thousands of kids were taken away. They're no longer able to speak their language, practice their culture, and pretty much not becoming and understanding their history and who they were. So that's a lost generation, or lost many generations.
Okay. But again, this still doesn't have to do with anything. And it's not like, oh, so you're saying it's not bad? Obviously not. You're an idiot if you think that that's what I'm saying. Do you know what also happened? It proves that nobody actually cares. Nobody actually is offended by what Dallas Brodie said. You know how few people showed up to protest Dallas Brodie when they called for a protest against her in Vancouver, Quilchena, her riding? Two people showed up, because obviously she didn't say anything racist. Obviously she didn't say anything unfactual. But these people are bullies, and this is all about using a fake Graves hoax as a catalyst to sign stupid land deals and keep the Indigenous industry, the reconciliation industry fueled. And by the way, it has nothing to do with helping Indigenous people out at all. The land deals that are giving more land back to these bands does not actually help the average indigenous person. You think they could start a logging company on that land out of nowhere? No, they can't start a mineral company. They can't do their own oil and gas digs. It's basically socialist land now. It's like a Soviet state that you're living in where you don't actually own anything. It's the band that owns it. And isn't it kind of racist to imply that indigenous people belong on a socialist state, that they don't actually get to enjoy private property rights on their land? So it's not really their land at all. It's ridiculous. But this is all about paying the lawyers and the consultants and some people around, like the band councils, and everyone else can basically pack sand. This is bad for people in British Columbia. It's bad for Canadians, and it's especially bad for people who are living on reserves, for Indigenous people out there. This guy, Wade Grant, by the way, he supports all the left-wing policies that have been absolutely decimating the Indigenous community. He is in favor of safe supply. He's in favor of decriminalization. He is in favor of shutting down pipelines. The man is a hack. He doesn't care. He'd step over an Indigenous person in need just to go get mad at somebody for saying a word he didn't like that wasn't even offensive. So anyways, that's it for me today, guys. Stay tuned for more stuff to be happening in British Columbia. I think that the BC Conservatives have, in their current state, truly wrecked themselves, in the sense that why would a volunteer ever help these people out while they're messing around with their AGMs and not running them properly? They're kicking out MLAs for saying principled things that are conservative, and basically telling people that they can pack, heavily overpaying themselves in HQ, by the way. You'd be horrified by how much donor money was burnt up on people who weren't doing any work during the campaign. Why should these people get your vote or get your money when you could just go start something else if you wanted at this point? And the BC Conservatives proved that you can start something from scratch and get up pretty high pretty quickly. But anyways, that's just for another topic for another day. Have a good one.